So for me, I fell in love with Africa when I was 5 years of age. And I watched Born Free with George and Joy Adamson.
Didn't everyone?
And I'm sure a few others did as well. And I was just amazed with the fact that they were raising this lion cub. Now, I was living in Essex in the UK at the time. And for me, I decided I needed a lion cub. So I was trying to persuade my parents to get me one. Now, funnily enough, that didn't happen. But after a lot of trying to persuade them and complaining, they got me a tabby kitten in the end, which kept me quiet for a while. But what was so special about Africa for me? Well, those wide open, endless plains that just go on forever. And I had a fascination of cheetahs. I really do admire them. They're the smallest of our big cats in Africa. It's a single mother raising her family all by herself. And as a keen photographer, it's those beautiful amber colored eyes, especially when the sunlight hits them. So a little bit about myself. So I was living and working in Africa for just over 16 years before the pandemic. I originally went out to Zambia, South Luangwa National Park. I was there for 8 years. And that's actually where I met my husband. We got married out there and had a bush wedding. After 8 years there, moved across to Malawi for a short time. And then on to Tanzania, Sulu in the south, and then the Serengeti. And then finally into Kenya in Mara North Conservancy for the last 3 years. And during all of that time, our jobs, our roles were as safari camp managers. But I also got time to spend working with local communities and also with the cheetah researchers, especially in the Serengeti and the Mara. But then, as everybody knows, 2020 and the pandemic hit the world. By March, nobody was traveling any longer, so the safari camps all closed down. And I returned back to the UK, where I have been ever since. In April 2020, I decided to become a volunteer with the Cheetah Conservation Fund because I still wanted to do something in conservation and to help raise awareness. So a little bit about the equipment I use. I use Canon. I started off with a Canon 50D in the very beginning, and then I upgraded to a 6D and a 7D Mark II. But I didn't really get on very well with the 7D. So after about a year and a half, I sold it. And as of now, I use a 6D and a 5D Mark IV. The majority of my wildlife photography is taken with 100 to 400 mm lens, purely because, you know, when you're out there, you're in vehicles, there's not always enough space. So I tend to use a bean bag or hand hold if necessary. I also have a 500 mm lens. I use a 16 to 35 mm for landscapes. And then later on, you will see some photos that have been taken in the Maasai community, which were taken with a Tamron 28 to 300 mm. So this evening's journey through Africa is actually going to begin in Tanzania. And we're going to start, first of all, in Sulu Game Reserve. So it's about 45 minutes flight from Dar es Salaam. It's a huge game reserve. It's 55,000 square kilometers. But it's still very untouched. The northern section is really tourism. You have the Rufiji River that divides it all the way through. And then in the southern part, it is still actually split up into hunting blocks, which slowly are stopping and becoming more as photographic trips. So this is where I was based in Sulu. We had 14 tents. We were working with 54 staff. And it was right on the Rufiji River, which was amazing. And you could do so many activities there. You could do walking safaris, morning, afternoon, nights, game drives, and even boat safaris as well. So you had the Rufiji River, but off of that, you had 5 lakes. And each of the lakes was very, very different. This is one of the lakes, which had thick vegetation and these amazing palm trees. And another of the lakes, all these dead trees, which you could very carefully weave in amongst with the boat. But it was really a paradise for landscapes, but also for birds as well there. Now, talking of birds, for those of you that do love birds, Africa is an amazing place for bird watching, but also for bird photography. And especially as you're going along, by boat, down the rivers, lakes and streams, you'll certainly come across malachite kingfishers. But also, along the Rufiji River, normally by July, August time, the water starts to drop and these huge sandbanks appear in the middle of the river. And that's when the African skimmers arrive, because they like to build their nests right in the sandbanks. And pied kingfishers. I must say, I've never seen so many pied kingfishers as there. Pretty much every couple of meters, there would be a pied kingfisher perched, just waiting for the opportunity to dive in and grab a fish. And again, by July time, white-fronted bee-eaters would arrive in their thousands, because they would actually nest in the riverbanks there. Perfect way to actually see them was very slowly going down by boat. Even switching off the engine and just floating along was perfect, especially late afternoon, because the sun would hit the riverbank and literally the birds would come out onto the branches, roots of trees, and they would just sit there and enjoy the sun. And this is a little bee-eater. This is one of my favorite birds. I love the vibrant green colors. This is a great bird to actually sit and watch and observe, because it will go to a perch. If you're in a vehicle, you can just switch off the engine and you can just park up there and watch it, because it will take flight, will do huge, large circles, and it will always come back to the same perch time and time again. Because it's literally taking flight, trying to catch butterflies or flies that are passing by. Back down to the ponds, you'll certainly see hammercops. They like to go down there to fish, looking for frogs, snails, and this one are just caught a very small fish. But again, they certainly fly fast, so it is a very fast shutter speed. This was taken at around 0.002 of a second, and I was trying to pan to get it into focus. Carmine bee-eaters will arrive July, August time as well. Lovely, vibrant colours. They also join the white-fronted bee-eaters, nesting in the riverbanks. Safaris normally start early in the mornings. It's good to get out there before sunrise. Just as the sun is rising, you'll see so many birds and mammals that are taking advantage of that early morning sun. This is a mouse bird. And sunrise in Africa can be anything from around 5:30 in the morning to around 6:15, depending on time of year. So this was around 6:45 in the morning. The sun was up. It was still cold outside. This little mouse bird was enjoying that early morning sun. And it had literally sat there on this branch, wings spread out, facing into the sun. So it didn't want to move. It was being very cooperative because it was enjoying the warmth. As you're going down by safari, by boat, certain times of the year, it can certainly become challenging. The rivers start to drop, so you get a lot of shallow areas and just a few deep channels. And of course, the hippos like the deep channels, and the boat needs to use those deep channels as well. So there will be occasions when one of you will certainly get a little bit of a surprise. And as you're going in from the river into the lakes, again, early morning, the crocodiles are out enjoying that warmth of that early morning sun. So they'll just be sitting there on the riverbanks. So again, very slowly, you can cruise into the lake shore. Most of the photos, that I've taken have actually been by handheld, purely because, you don't want the vibration of the boat at times. I was in Selous in 2013, and I was there for 13 months. And the time I was there, it was really difficult to actually approach elephants by vehicle. Whenever you tried, they would be running away like this. And, they would be very skittish. And it was really for a couple of reasons. At that time, there was a lot of poaching that was going on. But since then, the rangers have done an amazing job to do a lot more patrols and get it under control. But also the elephants were crossing the river. They were coming across the areas where there were hunting still happening. They were getting spooked by the sound of gunshots, and then they were literally coming back across the river into the photographic safari area. But of course, whenever they heard the sound of a vehicle, it would still scare them. But also in Selous, the lion research project was underway, and they were working for the Frankfurt Zoological Society. Their job was to actually record, monitor, and photograph every single lion and pride in Selous, which was a huge job. But actually meeting them, I learned so much about the work they were doing. How do you identify a lion? Well, by looking at the whisker spot patterning on the face. Every single one is unique, just like our fingerprints. But they would also look at things like the notches on the ears, scars on the face and the body. And for them, they would be building up a picture of that lion or that pride. For me, it really was quite a change in the way that I looked at my photography. Because before then, it was a lion, and what was it doing? But after spending time with them, I started to look at my photos in a lot more detail. I started to recognize the same lions time and time again. And it started to build up a picture and a story of that lion or that pride. Which individuals were they with that pride? What were they doing and where were they? And it certainly made things a lot more interesting for me. For those of you that have travelled to the Mara over the last few years, you might have recognised this is Scar or Scarface. He was living in the Mara in the reserve. He died last year of old age. He was 14 years of age. But if you look at the face, you can see again, he had a damage to his eyelid, which made him very unusual and also very easy to identify. And he got this from actually having a fight with other males in the reserve. So back in Selous, we did have leopards, but at times they were very shy. This one particular leopard, she loved to live in amongst this huge, big, baobab tree. And every so often when you drove past, you'd stop and check. And this particular morning, this was about 8:30 in the morning, she actually came out through the branches and just sat there, but only for a few minutes, literally looking at us, and then disappeared again in amongst the branches of this big baobab tree. But the one thing that amazed me in Selous was the wild dog population there, especially August to December, because they would have come out from their dens. And in one particular day, I was very lucky to see 4 different packs of wild dogs there. And I have never seen this many wild dogs anywhere else in Africa. And I think they do particularly well in Selous because of the lack of other predators like lions and hyenas. So they find it much more easy to raise their pups there. But also there is a huge number of impala there as well, which is one of their preferred prey. So as I mentioned, I was there in Selous for 13 months. It's a very hot and humid place at times, so it was quite tiring and exhausting to actually live and work there 24 hours a day. So we got the opportunity to move to the Serengeti. And for me, that was my dream as a 5-year-old, to be in a place where there's the open plains. So the Serengeti is much smaller, only 14,750 square kilometers. It's 1,500 meters above sea level. So the temperature is nice and cool and refreshing all year round. Serenera is the central area. We were based 45 minutes south from there. This was the camp that we were based at, just to give you a little bit of an idea. It's a tented camp. There's no fence. Animals will come through whenever they please. It was 12 tents. It looked right out across the open plains. We ran totally off of solar power. And then there was a huge big rock formation behind the camp. This is the main area of the camp. So we had a lounge area looking out across the plains, a main dining tent, an area of the public toilets, but also a charging area where you charged all your cameras, and that's where you got Wi-Fi. And these are the solar panels which ran the whole camp. So fridges, freezers, Wi-Fi, power in all the tents. So these are the solar power panels that I showed you just now. So I was actually in the office early one morning, and suddenly our maintenance man came and saw me and said, there's a snake on the solar panels. And it was about 6:30 in the morning. So sunrise was around 6 o'clock that day. I grabbed my camera, which I always kept in the office, just in case I saw something interesting. And I walked down there with him. And yes, this snake was just lying there, enjoying the warmth of those solar panels. At that time, I wasn't sure what type of snake it was to start with. So with my 100 to 400 mil lens at 400 mils, I took a few photographs because I loved that vibrant green eye. I walked back up to the office to have a look, and then at a closer inspection, realized that it was actually a juvenile boomslang, which is rather a poisonous snake. So I thought, well, let me go back and have a look at the snake again. When I got back to the solar panels, the snake had already disappeared. And I never actually saw this snake ever again. And it certainly made me realize that you do need to, whenever you see an opportunity, you need to grab it, even if it is just a record shot, because you may never ever see or have that opportunity again. Walking around the camp, you also got to see a lot of wildlife as well by foot. These are Hyrax. They love to live in amongst the rocky areas. And amazing to think they're the nearest relative to the elephant. These photos are just taken with a 100 to 400 mil lens, and I was just walking around hand holding them. And you can get fairly close to these. They don't really run away. And April, May time, they give birth. They have a lot of babies, and they love to sit on the rocks, especially early morning, late afternoon, enjoying the sun. So you can also go up there with your camera. You can take your tripod and set up there as well. Also enjoying the rocky areas, the Ngama lizards as well. And this is a male, very vibrant in color. Females, unfortunately, a little bit more dull brown in color. And in any camp you go to in Africa, you'll certainly get a lot of wildlife coming through. You know, especially in East Africa, the camps are not fenced at all. We used to get a lot of buffaloes around the camp, especially late afternoon and evening time. And sometimes the number could be, you know, a very few, 4, 5, 10. But I've also seen up to around 400 in number as well. Now, for me, the buffalo is one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. It's very unpredictable. You just do not know what it's thinking. There'll be times when it will just stand there and stare at you like this one. Sometimes it will run away. There will be the odd occasion when it will literally run straight towards you. So for guests, early mornings, evening times, you would always be escorted by one of our Maasai security. We'd also get lions on a regular basis around the camp as well. This is actually taken from a vehicle so that I could get that low level looking straight at this lioness. And it was just by the camp. There was an area where we used to have quite a few pools of water, and they would just come down to drink. For me, walking around the camp, early morning and at night, I would be walking by myself with just a very bright torch and a radio. And on one particular evening, it was about 8 o'clock at night, I was walking from the main area along the footpaths, shining my torch as I went past the guest tents, when suddenly, by torchlight, I picked up a lion that was literally walking straight towards me. I stopped. I was shining my torch around to check if there were any other lions. I couldn't see any others. So very slowly, I walked backwards towards a huge big rock. I called on the radio to our security because we had guests staying in the camp, and I didn't want them to be walking into this lion by mistake. The lion actually went down to one of the guest tents and just laid in front of it. It started calling, and out of the darkness came two more lions that I didn't even see. All three of them just laid there and fell asleep. So I returned back to the office where my husband was surprised to see me back until I showed him the lions and he understood my reasoning. We actually had guests that were staying in that tent at the time, but at that exact moment, they were having dinner in the main dining tent. So I walked down there and said to them, well, don't rush your dinner. And maybe have another glass of wine or two because your tent's occupied at the moment. After about 45 minutes or so, the lions woke up again. They had a huge, big stretch and yawn. And then they just walked out through the camp and out the other side. I think they were literally having a bit of a cat nap before they went out hunting for the night. And also right next to the camp, we had a spotted hyena den. And there was about 20 to 22 individuals of different ages living there. So when you left the camp early morning on your game drive, you would always stop and have a look to see what was happening. Because quite often, the hyenas would be coming back to the den with a little bit of a snack. This particular morning, this one was carrying the leg of a zebra back to the den. But the youngsters were too young to go out hunting or scavenging with the adults, so they would always be at the den with their mother or a babysitter. So it was always worth stopping to see what they were getting up to. And of course, as a camp manager, having a hyena den right next to your camp was pretty hard going, to be honest, because every single night you needed to make sure everything was locked away. Otherwise, the next morning, you would find your tables or chairs have been chewed on, or your cushions scattered everywhere, or even ripped to pieces. And about a 20-minute game drive away, we had a lake. 6 months of the year, the flamingos would arrive there. It was a great place to go for bird watching as well. Late afternoon, around say 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon was the best time to go there for photography. The light was just perfect. You could drive really close to the edge of the water there. You could actually get out of the vehicle. You could sit down on the ground and you could even lay low as well to capture the flamingos. This photo and the next one I'll show you are both taken with my 500mm lens. And I was out of the vehicle just sitting on the ground to capture these flamingos. Because you could also see them on a regular basis coming into land or taking off to fly as well. But other bird life there is a Cape teal. And you've got black-winged stilts as well. They would spend hours just balanced on one leg. And this is an Egyptian goose chick enjoying a little bit of a drink from the puddle nearby. So I know a couple of us were talking about, global climate change. So we certainly saw that as well in Africa, especially in the last few years. So this was in 2015 in the Serengeti. The lake I showed you just now with the flamingos, this was it in 2015. We had very little rainfall that year. So this huge big lake literally dried up to a very small pond. And nobody had ever seen it with this less amount of water, which was very concerning. 2016 was the opposite effect. We had so much rain that the whole area totally flooded. So for 2 years, the flamingos never arrived because they like to come there to feed from the lake. It was only in 2017 that we actually saw the correct or our normal rainfall again. And this has been happening even after that time as well. That we've seen huge differences in rainfall in Africa. And just by the lake, there's a huge big rock formation called Gong Rock. You can actually climb up it. There's steps that have been cut into the rocks. And when you climb up there, you get an amazing view of the Serengeti. Up on the top is this one big rock. And as you can see, there's a few indentations in it. If you take a small rock and tap it, you can actually, it makes a metallic sound. So you can actually tap into it. And they reckon that it is a form of communication that the Maasai use, or used to use, should I say, when they were living in the Serengeti. You can also see the rock art formations where the Maasai used to live in the caves there as well. In the Serengeti, you'll certainly come across plenty of lions. Lions there can be collared. Researchers tend to collar 1 or 2 lions in each pride, which makes it very easy for them to actually be able to monitor their movement. And for the first time, I found that lions climb trees. This is one pride of lions up one tree. And they will climb for a few reasons. In the heat of the day, it's cool and refreshing under the belly. In certain areas, you get tsetse flies, which can really bite. So by climbing a tree, you can get away from them. April, May are the long rains. So the grass becomes very tall. So climbing a tree, you also then get a good viewpoint, looking for prey in the distance. But the one amazing thing that happens every single year is the Wildebeest Migration. And what an amazing journey this is. They reckon each individual animal will cover around 1,000 miles each year. Starting down in the south of the Serengeti or the Ndutu area, it then moves up through the Serengeti. This is where we were based, so we got the migration coming through every single year, slowly working their way up through the Serengeti to the Mara. It's now late December. We're in the southern part of the Serengeti. The herds have gathered. The females are all pregnant. Normally by early January, we get very short, small showers of rain. And so then the wildebeest will start to give birth. They reckon around 500,000 wildebeest calves are born every single year. For me, it was something I really wanted to see. So I normally took around 10 days holiday, late January, early February, and would go and stay down in the Ndutu area, the Serengeti. For the first 2 years, I certainly saw an awful lot of wildebeest and calves. But the one thing I really wanted to see was a wildebeest actually giving birth. Quite often, it would be at night or early hours of the morning. So for the first 2 years, I just saw many calves. The third year, when I arrived, exactly the same time, there was not one wildebeest there. The rains had come late. And so the wildebeest hadn't even got down there. It was still dry and dusty. But there was still so much to see, to be honest. Plenty of predators and other game around to watch and to photograph. After 3 nights of being there, we had heavy, heavy rain. The next morning I awoke and there were thousands and thousands of wildebeest everywhere. It's amazing how quickly things can change. Over the next 2 or 3 days, I spent watching wildebeest, hoping that one was going to give birth. I then came across this one female, and it was actually around 12:30 lunchtime. It was really harsh light to start with. She was very far in the distance, so we were watching just through our binoculars. She was actually walking around in huge big circles, laying down, standing up, lying down, looking very, very uncomfortable. And after watching her for a good hour, suddenly she dropped down and we could see that she was literally giving birth. She slowly had come a little bit nearer to us and we were able to go closer to her. After 10 minutes, the calf was already standing up with very wobbly legs. Another 20 minutes, and the two of them were already walking and trying to catch up with the rest of the herd. For me, it really was a very special moment. The herds will stay down in that southern part of the Serengeti and Ndutu for around 3 months. The calves are getting their strength up. They're really enjoying that lush green grass there. It's very nutritious for them. But also at the same time, plenty of predators, lions, jackals, hyenas, cheetahs, they're all coming into that area. And of course, they're taking advantage of the old wildebeest, but also the new calves as well. Even cheetahs will move in from other areas. They'll come there to give birth and they'll stay there for a few months because they know there's plenty of food for them there to raise their family. Normally by late March, it's time for the wildebeest to start moving on. Walking up through the Serengeti very slowly. And then normally by mid to late June, the Serengeti becomes very dry and dusty. There's very little grass left for the herds. So for them, they must keep moving, looking for food and water. Normally by July, they've started to get to the Mara River and begin to cross. And it really is an amazing thing to see, as a couple of you have mentioned. But, you know, there are a lot of rules and regulations to take place as a tourist. First, we have to stay back. We have to wait for the zebras and wildebeest to start to cross. So they need to go down into the river. Once they're in the water, the vehicles can very slowly go close to the riverbank. If the vehicles go too quickly, the herds will just scatter and they will not cross. You can spend hours and hours waiting for a crossing. And some days it will never happen because there are many, many crossing points along the Mara River. Sometimes you'll only see 2 or 3 individuals crossing, and it may only take a few minutes. But there are some amazing crossings which can last up to 2-3 hours, and it can literally be thousands and thousands of wildebeest crossing at any one time. But for the wildebeest and the zebras, it really is a dangerous time for them. In places, the Mara River is flowing very fast, but also huge crocodiles are waiting for them on the other side of the river. Some of them just do not make it because maybe they're old, they're tired, exhausted. The riverbanks are very steep in places. It can become very slippery, so they can just fall back because at times there's thousands and thousands crossing, so they're pushing each other. The riverbanks are wet and they just fall back down again. But of course, the vultures and the crocodiles are there to deal with those that don't make it. The wildebeest spend 3 to 4 months in the Mara. They're enjoying that lush green grass there. By around mid-October, the Mara gets very short rains. And so for the wildebeest, it's time to turn around and start that journey all over again, walking back through the Serengeti. By late December, they're back down in the southern part of the Serengeti and in Dutu, ready for another calving year. As I say, it really is an amazing journey that they do every single year. And they rely on the climate, on the weather to drive them. Over the last few years, with climate change, it has certainly confused the wildebeest at times. Staying in the Ndutu area, these are Fisher's lovebirds, which are only found in the north and central part of Tanzania. Banded mongoose, you'll quite often see huge troops of them, especially across the marsh areas. And they're literally running across looking for birds' eggs, because a lot of birds, like the plovers, are laying their eggs on the ground. Wherever you go in the Mara or Serengeti, you'll see these beautiful male lions with huge big manes. And this one really did catch my eye because it's a very unusual color. It's very blonde, which is quite an unusual color to see. And I haven't actually changed the color at all in post-processing. And this is his brother, so very different. And of course, you know, whenever there are the herds around, there's plenty of food. So it's a time of fun and play for the lion cubs. They're very inquisitive because lions can actually sleep for 16 to 20 hours a day. So it's normally only early in the morning, late in the afternoon, and at night time when they become more active. But if a pride has got cubs, it certainly makes things a little bit more interesting for you. And so when I was in the Serengeti, I got to meet Dennis, who's from the Cheetah Research Project. He actually took me out in the field and taught me so much about cheetahs and their behavior. So we identify lions by their whisker spot patterning on their face. How do you identify cheetahs? Well, it's by looking at the spot patterning on the coat. Every single one is unique, again, just like our fingerprints. And you're actually looking at the size and the pattern that the spots form to be able to identify them. This female cheetah we came across early in the morning. In fact, to start with, it was before sunrise. So she was actually a silhouette in the very far distance. Slowly, we got closer to her and approached her, but in the vehicle. She was actually sitting on this huge big rock. This was taken at 6:30 in the morning. It was a very, very cold June morning. I think I had about 3 jackets on at the time. She was sitting on this huge rock, enjoying the sun coming straight towards her. she was getting the warmth from the rock, but she was also using this rock to look out across the open plains as well. And especially in the Serengeti and the Mara, these huge big rock formations are perfect to go and check out early mornings and late afternoons, where you will come across any of the big cats, lions, leopards, and also cheetahs. Another of the cheetahs from the Serengeti, her name is Tia Maria, and she was actually a very successful mother. Now, a cheetah mum has to teach her cubs how to survive by themselves. So this particular cheetah, she had one cub that was 15 months of age, and she was teaching it how to kill. So the mother here had just taken down a young wildebeest. She'd suffocated it, but she hadn't killed it. And then she called her cub over, and the mother walked away. Now, the cub didn't really know what to do. First, it was trying to suffocate it on the belly, but that didn't really work. And eventually, she realized that you have to go to the throat to suffocate it. And it was after about 40 minutes or so, the cub succeeded. And the mother then came and joined the cub, and they were feeding off of this wildebeest. But the one thing I always say to people, it doesn't matter what time of day it is, but, don't just rush around, take a photo and move on to the next animal. It is really important to just sit there, watch and observe. This particular situation, we were sitting there for probably a good 2 hours watching everything happen. It was very harsh light, so it was not great to take photographs, but there wasn't anything else to photograph anyway at that time of day. But just to sit there and watch what was happening, we really learned a lot about cheetah behavior, how the mother and the cub interact, and how the cub learns from its mother on trying to undertake its first kill. Also in the Serengeti, cheetahs have learned how to use vehicles to help them to their advantage. This is one of 2 brothers there that actually learned to use the vehicles to ambush adult wildebeest. It had just taken this down and was dragging it across the road where its brother was under a tree. And Maasai giraffe, for me, very, very elegant. When I came across these giraffe, they were all huddled and standing together and all looking in one direction. And they were standing there not moving for a good 20 minutes or so. And normally this means that they have seen something. They fear a danger, or maybe a predator is lurking around. Now, I couldn't see anything, even through binoculars. I just could not see what they were looking at. But then after about 20, 30 minutes, this lion popped its head up. So again, the wildlife is giving you information. They're giving you alarm calls. They're standing there very silently, but they're all looking in one direction. And obviously height was an advantage on this particular day. Honey badgers are normally nocturnal and very, very shy. On this afternoon, it was about 5:30 in the afternoon, and this honey badger suddenly came out from a termite mound. And it was busy looking around and sniffing in amongst the grass, and literally came towards the vehicle, which was very unusual. Gave me the opportunity to grab my camera, my 100 to 400mm lens, and I was just hand holding it because to start with, I wanted to grab a couple of shots, which were record shots more than anything. But slowly it was coming nearer and nearer to the vehicle, very, very inquisitive. sniffed around in the grass in front of us and around us, and then it turned around and went back down the termite mound again. And for me, it's the only time in 16 years that I've actually seen a honey badger in daytime. Wherever you go in Africa, you will come across elephants. Early mornings, they normally come out from the forest areas and start to feed on the open plains. You'll quite often see late morning, the youngsters having a bit of a play fight. And in the heat of the day, they're enjoying that cool, refreshing dust bath. But again, I always say, whenever you come across elephants, just switch off the engine of the vehicle and sit there and watch. They will walk all around you. They'll be very inquisitive with their trunks raised and maybe sniffing around you. But you really get to appreciate their size and how quietly they can move. And when you look close into them, for me, looking into their eye, I really think you see into their soul and their compassion. The one thing that people ask me is, when I go on safari, will I see a leopard? Well, yes, you will. Sometimes only a glimpse of one jumping down from a tree, or maybe just the tail dangling. But there are a lot of leopards out there. Or maybe this one that was just sitting on this tree looking out across the open plains. And this one spent the whole afternoon sound asleep on this tree, enjoying the warmth of that afternoon sun. And I think I sat there for a good 4 hours, just watching, hoping that it was going to move. Eventually it woke up after 4 hours, because in the very far distance, it saw some impala. And it sat there for a while thinking, can I be bothered to climb down the tree and start to hunt? Which is what I was hoping was going to happen. But in the end, it just went back to sleep again. Certain times of the year, the acacia trees come into flower, and so the baboons start to enjoy those flowers, including the youngsters. Back to the amazing bird life. These are yellow-billed oxpeckers enjoying a ride on the back of a buffalo. And then they take flight, maybe flying from buffalo to buffalo, zebra, or giraffe. This was taken at a very fast shutter speed. This was 4,000th of a second to get it in focus. Even so, the wings are still not sharp. And the lilac-breasted roller, probably one of the most photographed birds in the whole of Africa. But when the sunlight hits those colors of the feathers, it really is a rainbow. And these are Pygmy Falcons. These are very tiny birds. Now, I've only ever seen them in the southern part of the Serengeti when the migration has been around. On the left is a juvenile, on the right is the adult. They're actually taken with my 6D, 100 to 400 mil lens, but it's been very, very highly cropped, to be honest, because they were very far away. They're very shy birds. And a martial eagle that had just grabbed a guinea fowl and taken it up into a very small tree. After the rainy season, you'll see lots of babies being born. These are hartebeest, zebra, lion cubs, and warthogs, which are probably one of the hardest things to actually photograph. Because whenever you pick up your camera, they just turn around, stick up their tail and run away normally. and the huge herds of elephants that start to gather because they're enjoying that rich, lush grass. So after 3.5 years in the Serengeti, we got the opportunity to move into the Mara with the same company. We were based in Mara North Conservancy, and the Conservancy was only 300 square kilometers. The Mara ecosystem is 3,000 square kilometers in total. It borders the Serengeti. Each of the conservancies, and there are 16 of them in total, there are no fences in between, so the wildlife can move from the reserve into the conservancy. So what is the difference between a reserve and a conservancy? Well, a reserve, there's no people living in a national park or a reserve. There's strict rules. Game drives can be from sunrise to sunset only. You have to stay on the road. You cannot do any off-road driving. So if you do come across your lion in the very far distance, you have to either have a very long lens, hope that that lion comes towards you, or otherwise you can only sit and watch it through binoculars. At times, the national parks and reserves can be very busy. I've seen more than 30 vehicles around a lion or leopard, especially in the migration time. A conservancy is land that is owned by the local community, the Maasai. It's restricted to how many safari camps are allowed in any conservancy. In Mara North, there's only 12 camps allowed. We paid a monthly rent to the landowners, and there were more than 700 landowners in that conservancy that actually earned money from tourism. You will come across the Maasai there with their cattle at times, but they are only allowed in certain areas to graze. You're more flexible with your game drives activities. You can go off-road. So if you see that lion in the distance, you can literally drive up towards it. Only 5 vehicles maximum are allowed around any sighting, around that lion or leopard. You can do morning, afternoon, night drives, and walking safaris as well there. And for me, I think this model really does work because it's tourism, the local community, and wildlife all living and benefiting from each other. So Mara North Conservancy is a 45-minute direct flight from Nairobi. When you arrive, your guides will meet you, give you a welcome drink, a briefing of the area, and your safari will begin. This is where we were based. We had 10 tents there, 35 staff all from the local area. The tents are very comfortable, ensuite, Wi-Fi charging in the tents. Safari time, as I mentioned, starts early. You normally get a wake-up call around 5:30 in the morning, which is still pitch black. You can have tea, coffee in your tent or around the campfire. And then you head out for your game drive whilst it's still dark. The predators are more active at this time of day. So you want to be out there before sunrise to get in position. Whether it's one of the cats or just the silhouette of the wildebeest with the sun rising, every single day is going to be very, very different. This photo is the sunrise. I've taken it at a very low angle. So the vehicle is positioned down, looking up with the wildebeest walking on the horizon. But also you'll see the hot air balloons early in the morning, or maybe you want to have a go and do one yourself. But safaris are very flexible. You know, by some months of the year, the light is already harsh at 8 o'clock in the morning. Especially your lions and even other big cats, normally by 8 o'clock, they've already gone into the shade and they'll be sleeping for the rest of the day. Cheetahs will be more active because they tend to hunt during the day. So you normally take a breakfast out with you. You're flexible. There's no point in rushing back to camp. It's all about being out there and enjoying your safari time. You can stop and have breakfast whenever you want. 8 o'clock in the morning, 10:30, even 11:30 if you want to. Normally by lunchtime, you return back to the camp for lunch. It's time to recharge your batteries, recharge your camera batteries, have a bit of a rest. And then normally by 4 o'clock, as it starts to get a little bit cooler, you get back out there again for your game drives. And normally by around 5:30, 6 o'clock, the lions are starting to wake up again. Just before the sun starts to set, you normally stop, have a refreshing drink, glass of white wine, cold beer, and you sit out in the vehicle and watch the sunset. Every single sunset is so very, very different. You can continue on with a night drive if you want to, using the spotlight, which normally has a red filter on it, just to protect the animals so that they don't have any harsh light and they can still hunt. But you can still take photos with the red filter on. For me, I normally convert them back into black and white, just so that you still get a beautiful, clear photo. Or you return back to the camp and enjoy a drink and a chat around the campfire. And then as it's getting dark, you're enjoying the Milky Way on those beautiful, clear nights. So as I mentioned, you certainly get a lot of wildlife coming through the camp. This is our camp in the Mara, and this is a cheetah called Amani that would quite often spend time very close to the camp. I would often wonder what she was doing. What is she thinking? Is she thinking, what are they doing at the camp? Or maybe she's wondering what the chefs are preparing for lunch today. We also had a local pride of lions. This is the Kelly Pride, which would come through on a regular basis. This was two of the females who had two older cubs that were 7 months of age. And they had 7 tiny cubs that were 3 months of age. And this particular day, the night before, the females had gone out hunting. The tiny cubs were too young to go hunting. So the mothers actually left the 7 cubs in amongst these bushes at the camp. And they'd hidden them all night long there. And it was only the next morning that they came to collect them. This is the 2 dominant males from that pride, Karibu and Rafiki. And when I was there, they were really in their prime. The 2 brothers, they were 5 years of age. They had 4 females and cubs of various ages, from 7 months down to those 3-month-old cubs. There was plenty of food and plenty of water for them around. Another of the females. And for the cubs, it was a time to play, very inquisitive, and to explore. They were very safe in amongst that pride. Another of the females who had recently given birth to 3 cubs. This was actually taken at 6:30 in the evening. It was getting dark. ISO 8000, 100 to 400 mil lens, but I must say it was struggling with the light at this time. And she was moving those cubs from one den site to the other. And so for 2 years, all was calm within the pride. But then suddenly, a coalition of 4 males moved into another area, from another area. They wanted to take over the pride. When we were all sleeping one night, there was an attack on Karibu and Rafiki. Karibu was badly injured. The KWS vet was called the next morning, but there was nothing they could do for him, so he was put down, and his brother just ran away. It left the females with the cubs by themselves, but they couldn't protect the cubs. These 4 males came in and killed every single cub. And then they started to mate with the females again. And as of now, they are still the dominant males in this pride. Buffaloes in the Mara are also very, very aggressive against lions, and it's something I've never seen anywhere else. They can smell the area. They will trample the area where lions are or have been. They would chase lions up into trees, and they will keep them there and not let them back down again. They are also responsible for many deaths of lion cubs in the Mara. I'm now going to introduce you to 2 cheetah brothers, Mbili and Mayele. Their names mean 2 forever, and they have formed a coalition. In December 2017, 3 cheetahs arrived, the 2 brothers with their sister. They were very young. They were very inexperienced at the time. After around 3 months, their sister left them and moved to a different area to ensure no interbreeding happened between brother and sister. Over the next 2 years, I got to watch these brothers grow. They became very magnificent cheetah brothers and very good at hunting. On this one particular morning, they'd been trying to hunt gazelle. But as you can see, the grass is very short. They could not get close enough to them. By lunchtime, they were hungry and they were still trying to hunt. They actually succeeded in taking down a young wildebeest. They were in the middle of suffocating it when out of the bushes came this lioness and stole it from them. In the distance, the cheetah brothers are running off to the bushes. It's now hot, so the cheetahs decided to rest in the thick bushes. By 4:30, it was starting to cool down, so they were back out there trying to hunt. But this time of year is difficult. The grass is very short. They could not get close enough to any of the impala or gazelle. Eventually, they see some impala in the distance. They try again, using the bushes for cover. They succeed. One suffocating it, one holding it down. Once the impala was dead, the cheetah brothers were feeding fast. After 1 hour, their bellies are full. Already vultures and hyenas had arrived on the kill. So for the cheetah brothers, it was time to move on. Late December, January, February in the Mara, you get misty, foggy mornings at times, which really gives some great atmosphere to your photography. But as you can see, it's quite difficult for any of the predators to be able to see into the distance or even go hunting at times. We saw that lions climb trees. Do cheetahs? Well, yes, they do. Not particularly well. They'll mainly climb to scent mark the tree and leave a message for another cheetah. And so this is Amani again. Her name means peace in Swahili. She's actually one of the oldest cheetahs in the Mara. She's around 10 now. And back in April 2018, she gave birth to 3 cubs. A mother keeps those cubs very well hidden for the first 4 weeks. because they don't want any lions or hyenas to find them and try to kill them. At 5 weeks of age, she started to bring them out into the open more. On this particular afternoon, she was walking across the open plains when suddenly in the distance, a hyena saw her and was heading straight towards the cubs. She tried to hide the cheetah cubs, but they were just not listening to her. They wanted to come out and follow her. Now, we don't intervene with nature. We let nature take its turn. However, cheetahs are becoming endangered in the wild. And so the rangers actually intervened this time. They drove their vehicle between the cheetah and the hyena. The hyena could not see the cubs any longer. It didn't think about walking around the vehicle. It got bored and walked away. And so for Amani and her cubs, it was a very lucky day. The cubs are growing. They're 6 months of age now. And look at those beautiful amber-colored eyes. The cubs are still too young to go hunting, but they practice stalking and pouncing on each other. If you do come across cheetah cubs at this age, it really is fun to watch. They'll chase each other for hours on end. They'll be watching their mother, learning how to hunt. And of course, whatever she catches, they will enjoy. They're 10 months of age. They're nearly as big as their mother now, who's in the middle, and they can actually hunt for themselves. Their brother had just taken down a scrub hare. At 18 months of age, they've become independent, meaning their mother is already pregnant and will just walk away and leave the cubs by themselves. These 3 cubs stay together for another 3 months. After that time, they all split, and as of today, they are leading separate lives. These are the 2 females, Queerly and Coletta. Both of them have already raising their first litter of cubs. And their brother, Jasiri, which means bold, is living a solitary life as well. White rhinos. So in our neighbouring conservancy, we had a project that was a breeding project with 2 white rhinos that came from Lake Nakuru. And we could actually go and visit there. You could get out of the vehicle and walk around with an armed ranger and learn so much about these 2 rhinos, which was great for photography because you could pretty much get fairly close to them. And as I mentioned, a conservancy is the land that's owned by the local Maasai. So when you're out on safari in any conservancy, you will often see the herdsmen with their goats and sheep and cattle. And the Maasai are very proud people. They love to have their photo taken. And of course, you can always go and visit a traditional Maasai village. This photo is taken with my wide angle, 16 to 35 mil. And I was actually at a very low angle to capture this. Whenever you visit a village, they will always be doing a welcome dance for you. They're also wanting to show and share with you their traditions. This is how they used to hunt with bow and arrow. And how do you make a fire without a box of matches? By rubbing 2 sticks of wood together, dried grass and elephant dung. This is a local chief of the village. He had 6 wives, 35 children, and he told me he couldn't remember most of their names. And the women build the houses. It takes 4 weeks to build a house from a wooden structure, and then a combination of elephant dung, and cow dung smeared inside and out. And this is the finished house. There's no running water at the villages, so the women walk to the river every single day to collect water. And if you're lucky like these ladies, you would have donkeys. Otherwise, the women have to carry those containers by themselves. The houses are very small and dark inside, but they're always wanting to show you how they live. No electricity, but slowly small solar panels, mainly for charging a mobile phone. And the ladies will do intricate beadwork at the villages as well and sell later on. And as I say, they love to have their photo taken. So when you're at the village, you know, just ask their permission. But they love to look at your photos, especially nowadays with a digital camera. They love to look at the back of your camera. And the young children don't go to school. They're too small, because on average, a child has to walk around 2 hours each way across those open fields. Once a week, there's market day, so it's really interesting to go to. The Maasai don't have bank accounts like we do. Their wealth is in their cattle. So if they do need money for something, they normally have to sell a goat, sheep, or cow. And there's also a second-hand market as well. This gentleman was selling second-hand shoes that he had actually made from old tires. The women will sell their beadwork there. And also you can see that they'll be selling vegetables, fruits, beans, rice. And just to give you an idea of one of the local schools, this was a local primary school where there was 450 children there, 50-50 boys to girls. But the classrooms were very, very small and cramped. On average, around 60 children to one small classroom. But the children really wanted to learn. They loved education. And for me, I helped them with fundraising, with repairing old classrooms, building new desks for them. And of course, children in Africa love football. So whenever there was the opportunity, they'd be playing football. And these are their homemade footballs, which are just made from plastic and string. So just to finish off with a few more photos actually from the wildlife. So normally around March, you start to get these dramatic skies coming, and also late October, November as well, when the short and the long rains start. And there really are amazing skies in the distance of these small showers of rain. And as I mentioned before, just being out there, you know, at times when the cheetahs are around with cubs, which can be any time of the year. This was one young jackal puppy. It was one of 4, very curious because the family had come across a termite mound and they'd never seen this area before. And these puppies were literally jumping in and out of the holes. And so I sat there for probably a good hour and a half, just watching them jumping in and out. And I was lucky just to capture this one coming out of this hole. The Maasai giraffe just walking across the open plains, or maybe enjoying a drink. the serval cat, which is very shy and not often seen. And the cheetah enjoying the termite mound. Two male lions enjoying a drink at a water hole. And how gentle the elephants are. But also two bull elephants just come out of the forest area. A couple of zebras enjoying a little bit of a squabble or argument. The beauty of the leopard. And this was very early in the morning. So this was about 6:30 in the morning. This young male had just woken up. He was having a bit of a stretch, but he was also calling for his brother at exactly the same time. And for me, this really does sum up Africa. Africa changes you forever, like nowhere on earth. Once you have been there, you will never be the same. But how do you begin to describe its magic to someone who has never felt it? How can you explain the fascination of this vast, dusty continent whose oldest roads are elephant paths? Could it be because Africa is the place of all our beginnings, the cradle of mankind, where our species first stood upright on the savannas of long ago? So thank you for joining me in a little bit of my time in Africa, and I'll be very happy to answer any of your questions. But if you think of any later on, feel free to drop me an email. If you want to look at more of my photos, that's my website. Or if any of you want to come and see Amani and her cubs in the Mara, I am running safari trips in November this year, but also February of next year as well, which are photographic safaris, but I'm also running some for just women only as well. So thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Unbelievable.
Fabulous presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing photos.
Thank you.
Can I ask you
Yeah.
to tell me your favorite animal on safari?
For me, it's definitely the cheetah,
I
followed
thought so.
by the elephants, to be honest.
It's a hard pick between the two, isn't it?
It is, for different reasons, to be honest.
Yes.
You know? But yeah, I love both of them.
Yes, I'm passionate about the cheetahs, and I think it's because of the sort of the family relationships that they have. And if you visit frequently, as you obviously were in the position to, you see the development of the family, and what I believe to be a very sad time when the brothers or the sisters break up and go off on their own, and you see them, you know, trying to survive and learn to hunt. Some of them are not very successful when they leave.
Exactly.
And as you say, the elephants, for a different reason. I think it's the matriarch who sort of looks after the herd and guides them, but also the way they help each other and they raise each other's and protect each other's young. So
I think with elephants you can really feel their emotions, you know, their family connection as well. And you know, you can actually feel that in a way that, you know, as humans we have the same feelings as them, which really is, you know, quite emotional at times when you're watching them and how they behave. You know, for me, I was very lucky to watch Amani raise her cubs from 4 weeks up to that independence. And, you know, I saw a lot of the time that, you know, what she went through and how hard it was for her to raise them, because you've got those other predators out there that will try to kill those cubs at any time. So she was very successful, which was very unusual in a way, that she raised all 3 of her cubs to independence.
Yeah.
Alison, I wanted to ask you,
Hmm.
are there no panthers in Africa?
Sorry, what was the question? Was there any
Are there no panthers? The big
panthers?
panthers.
No, no panthers.
No panthers, no
But
tigers.
leopards.
No
Yeah,
tigers.
but we do have lots of leopards.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Oh, I see somebody's got a leopard now as a background.
I found one.
Excellent.
I didn't get to see any. I didn't get to see any cheetahs, unfortunately.
That's a
Alison,
shame. It's a
the
shame.
other thing that you might like to comment on for people who are serious photographers, which are most of the people that are watching, joining you today, is the fact that if you are a serious photographer for wildlife, you really have to be on the vehicle yourself without other guests, because you talk about the period of time that you would spend watching for something unusual to happen. And you can't do that if there are just tourists, I'll call them, who are on board and they want to see as many of the animals as they can in a 3-day stay or whatever, and then they sort of want to move on after a very short period of time. So it's expensive to do that, but you won't get the best out of the trip unless that's the case. You might like to comment on it for others.
No, that is very true, actually. You know, if you do want to go on safari, you know, I would say pick very carefully, you know, who you choose to go with and the company, and do a little bit of research as well. Because some of these bigger camps and things, you know, you will be on there with 6 people on a vehicle where you haven't got that much space. And as Roger says, you know, some of them are just ticking a list. And it is one thing that I really cannot emphasize enough. Don't go to loads and loads of different parks, you know, just pick a couple where you can actually spend time, and you can spend time watching the wildlife, and you will be amazed what develops from it as well, what you actually get to see. You know, it's the interaction of one species, but other species as well. You'll also get to go out there early in the mornings, which is so important, before sunrise, to be out there. You're watching, you're following the stories, you know, of what's going on. You'll know where there's a lion pride and maybe they're looking a little bit hungry. So it will be trying to track them down to see whether they're going to be hunting early that morning and things. And it's very, very special then. It really is. So I would, you know, either you have your own vehicle, or you go on a photographic trip where there are very few people and that's what they focus on. And that's one of the things that I do on my trips. We only have 4 people in a vehicle, you know, and it's pretty much you're out there for as long as you want to be out there, and you'll stay with that particular animal for as long as we want to. It's not about ticking the boxes then. So, you know, if that family of elephants are doing numerous things, you get the opportunity to watch them, or maybe the lions are going to hunt, you get to sit and watch. You know, it's nature, so you never know what nature provides. Sometimes you sit there and the lions are asleep for hours on end. But otherwise, sometimes you can just be blown away with what you see.
So how long?
Africa, sorry. I was going to say, Africa never disappoints you in my books.
So your trips that you
Yeah.
organize, how long are they? A week or 2 weeks?
Yeah,
or-
they're 7 nights in 2 different conservancies. And I've purely picked conservancies because of that flexibility, as I mentioned earlier. You know, you can go out there during the day, at night time, but also there's less vehicles around as well. You can, you haven't got that 30 vehicles around a sighting at any time. So we can go off-road as well. We have to be 20 meters from animals so that we don't interfere with them. But it, you know, it really works well. Plus a conservancy is giving money back to the local community as well, which I think is good. I I think that's very important.
Thank
And then
you.
people can do, you know, additional add-ons as well if they want to, you know, to go up to Amboseli or to go to a different national park. But my trips are focused in the Mara.